Welcome back to the cigar smoke-filled back room. I am Doug with Tusk Consulting, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, tuskconsulting@gmail.com. If you are a pro-gun Republican and you are running for office and you would like some help with a political consultant, please get a hold of me at that email. If you're not a pro-gun Republican, walk on, don't want to work with you. For the record, the cigar today is a Romeo y Julieta. They are not any kind of sponsor to the program, but if they were to drop me an email, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, maybe they could be. Anyhow, today's topic in the ongoing series of things that are not discussed enough or truthfully enough in politics is about hard money. Hard money is different from soft dollars or super PACs in that hard money is what a candidates committee actually raises and spends. This is when Joe Blow, candidate for this office, forms a campaign committee, Friends of Joe Blow, or Committee to Elect Joe Blow, whatever it's called. And they have a fundraiser, and they raise money, and they spend money to elect Joe Blow. It's very different from what super PACs do, and what affiliated groups do, what political contributing entities do, what bundlers do. We're not messing with any of that. All we're talking about right now is hard dollars. So money is, money in politics is a fascinating field and a deep field and a wide field, and there's a whole college course you could probably do on it. There's a lot of misconceptions about it too. But at the end of the day, what you need to understand about all money in politics, and especially hard money, is that it is a tool. And most of the time it is a tool for the purpose of getting name ID hits. Name ID hits are absolutely the lifeblood of the campaign. They are what makes a candidate at most levels electable. It's only at the very highest levels of politics that you have to worry about things other than name ID. And even then, name ID is still indispensable. So to get name ID hits, you have to spend money. You have to spend money on media ads, TV, radio, newspaper if you're still in the dark ages. You have to get yard signs made. You have to get lit pieces printed, all that kind of stuff. You got to send out mailers. You got to do digital ads, streaming ads. You get the point. All of those have the purpose of increasing your candidate's name ID. Higher the name ID, the more votes they're probably going to get. All those things cost money. And therefore, you have to spend money to get those things to increase your name ID. Now, there's not a perfect correlation. Your media strategy, there is a lot of factors that go into how you decide to do your media strategy, which we're not going to get into right now. But in this video, we're going to talk about hard dollars spent and raised by the campaign committee for a particular candidate. So some people think about attack ads also. And yes, you can use hard dollars to attack an opponent. I traditionally tell candidates not to do this. Partially because there's always backsplash, mud spatters, and if you attack your opponent, some of that's going to rebound on you. And at the end of the day, that's not really productive. More typically, if your opponent needs attacked, you find a surrogate or some other third party to do it. You don't, as the candidate or your candidate committee, actually go and do the attacking of your opponent. And also, you can use hard money for things like get out the vote efforts, but again, traditionally those are done by other entities. Get out the vote efforts are where single issue groups, party organizations, your county party, your state party, what have you, become very important. They tend to do the get out the vote efforts, not individual campaigns. Sometimes an individual campaign, if they're like the anchor of the whole slate, will do it. But more traditionally, that is where your party organizations really come into effect. We had, of course, the topic of our last video was polling. It is somewhat common to use hard money to get polling data, do surveys, see where you stand, maybe drive a particular narrative with your poll to tell people where they should think you stand, which may be different from where you actually stand. But regardless, that is another valid expense. And of course, there's all the associated expenditures with a campaign, your consultants, your fundraiser, your campaign staff, travel expenses, food and lodging, all that kind of stuff. The campaigns are expensive. And the higher level they are, the more expensive they are. The bigger media markets they have to play in, the more expensive they are, etc. Okay. But having said that, there's also limits to what you can raise. And those limits vary. There's federal limits, there's state limits, sometimes there's local limits. It depends on what office that the candidate is running for. For this conversation, we're only going to talk about federal limits, partially because I don't have the time to go into every particular state's nuances or tricks. My state of Ohio may be different than your state. Some locality you're in may have different rules, whatever. So for right now, we're just going to talk about federal candidates. Candidates for president, U.S. Senate, Congress. So the federal limits are $3,300 contribution per contributor per election. Now, that's not to say that you can only write a check to your favorite candidate for $3,300. There's a bunch of ways, and at this point I want to give the disclaimer that I'm neither a lawyer nor am I an accountant, but that doesn't matter because some of these are pretty obvious. So $3,300 per election per contributor, per donor. Well, here's an easy one. If your congressman is running and he's got a primary and he's got a general election, you could write him a check for $6,600. $3,300 of that will get allocated to the primary, $3,300 of that will get allocated to the general, and boom, there you go. You wrote a $6,600 check, assuming you can afford that, of course. So maxing out, writing a $3,300 check is what you call max. Writing a $6,600 check is what's called a double max. But it doesn't end there. You say, well, that's an interesting way around it. You're right, $3,300 for primary, $3,300 for a general election. All right. What if you're married? You and your spouse can both do that $6,600. So now we're up to $13,200 for just you and your spouse, right? So because $3,300 per person for the primary, $3,300 per person for the general, $6,600 for each. Combine that together, that's $13,200. That's some real money now. Unless you think that's the end of it, it's not. Minors can also give. Depending on, there are, again, some states have different rules about it, but federal law does permit minors to contribute to a candidate. Now, you want to be careful about this. This is kind of getting into gray areas, but if you look on the FEC's website, they'll tell you minors can contribute. Again, I would personally, if a candidate came to me and said, hey, somebody's 12-year-old kid wants to give me $1,000, I'd say, no. But if the kid was 17 and was volunteering for the campaign and believed in the cause, and had a summer job or whatever, made his own money, okay, fine, sure. But generally speaking, I encourage people to avoid taking contributions from minors, even if the FCC says it's okay. So just thought on that. But there are also things that are not capped. So personal spending, the candidate's personal wealth, as much of that as you want to spend, you can. And this gets into. And there's a couple ways you can do that. One, you can just spend as much as you want. You don't have to, that $3,300, that's out the window when you're the candidate. So if you're a very wealthy person, you can spend millions of dollars if you wish on your own campaign. And sometimes you spend it and sometimes you loan it to yourself. And so you can loan yourself $1 million, $10 million, whatever. I've seen recently candidates loan themselves 8 figures. I've seen candidates loan themselves very small amounts of money. I've also seen candidates spend their own money very aggressively. But those are both permitted. They're reported a little differently on the reports, but both of those are permitted, and they do not hit that $3,300 contribution limit because you're the candidate. Now, one of the things this means is that candidates that are wealthy have certain inherent advantages over candidates that are not. As I'm sure you can imagine, if my opponent's got $100 million laying around and I am just a regular guy with a mortgage trying to make ends meet, they can outspend me, right? And okay, maybe I do a really good job of fundraising, a whole lot of dog and suds, and have the occasional high-end reception thing come in for me that I raised $10,000 to crack at. But my opponent's over there writing $1 million checks. How do you compete? And of course, the answer is you're probably not going to compete in terms of dollars. But remember, dollars are a tool for the goal of name ID. So it is a false assumption that the candidate with the most money automatically wins. There's a bunch of examples of when that was not true. Probably the most famous recent one being when Eric Cantor's re-election lost to Dave Brat. So just because you don't have the most money doesn't mean you're not going to win. It does, however, mean you need to get very efficient and creative. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So wealthy candidates have certain advantages that are obvious. And because of those advantages, some party establishment folk are very partial to wealthy candidates. Why? Well, it's simple. If you're a chairman of a party, you have a bunch of races to worry about, right? You've got legislative races, you've got executive races, you've got judicial races, you've got all school board races, township trustee races, county engineer races, your state legislature, just school board, state school board, whatever. There's so many things on your mind and so many things you have to think about in terms of fundraising for that if somebody comes along and says, hey, check it out, I'm going to run for this office and I'm going to self-fund, it's very tempting to say, great, go for it, because then I don't have to worry about it. Having said that, when candidates come to me and say, I want to self-fund, I tell them it's great that you can, but you shouldn't. And there's a few reasons why. The most important reason why is when a candidate self-funds, they pass up the opportunity to do fundraisers that make their donors into evangelists for them. If you hold a Dog and Suds and somebody comes and gives you $20 to be at your Dog and Sons fundraiser, it's not that the $20, if you're worth $100 million, the $20 doesn't matter to you, right? It's not going to impact your life. It's certainly not going to impact your campaign. It's $20. But now, when that person hears their friends talking about who they're going to vote for, they bring you up because they've got skin in the game, because they forked over money, hard-earned money that matters to them for you. You've made an advocate for your cause by accepting their donation. So I always tell people, even if you can self-fund, you shouldn't self-fund. Frankly, I think it's a lazy thing that some of the party establishment folks do, automatically going to wealthy candidates and giving them, oh yeah, you're a wealthy candidate. I think it's late. And before anybody brings up, yes, Donald Trump's fabulously wealthy, but I would like it noted, he did not outspend Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump, and he won anyway. So don't, get on my case in the comments saying that I'm a Trump guy. Okay, yes, he's very wealthy, but he also didn't bury Hillary Clinton with money. That's not how he won. Okay, completely different ballgame. All right, what else we got here? Campaign finance reporting guidelines and generally accepted accounting practices are not the same thing. And I'll give you an example of how they're not. Let's say, so one of the key things when you have a new candidate that files for office, they will go and do their first reporting period. They try to make it as advantageous as possible. So even before they declare that they're running for office, they'll be, or form their committee, designate the treasurer, whatever it is, they will be talking to their prospective donors and trying to get donations lined up for a strong first campaign finance report, because political nerds like me judge some candidates' viability based on that first campaign finance report. If it's strong, a candidate's pretty viable. If that is weak, candidate's not very viable. Okay, so they'll line up as much support as they can, they declare, they fundraise a bunch of money, and they'll typically make sure that whatever vendors they're using do not invoice them until the week after the campaign finance reporting deadline. So that way it doesn't show up as an expenditure yet on the reports. Now, is that explicitly kosher? Well, it would not be according to generally accepted accounting practices, right? But in campaign finance world, that stuff slides all the time. And they do it because what they're trying to maximize is cash on hand. You got your income, you got your expenditures, the difference is your cash on hand. If you can show a strong cash on hand, A, that makes people think you're viable, and B, it has the capacity to scare people out of the race. And if you're trying to establish a very strong position and get other people that are considering running to get scared and say, oh, we can't handle running against Jane Doe over here, she's raised just a boatload of money, That's an effective way of making it seem like you're stronger than you actually are. When it comes to raising money, there are both large dollar donors and small dollar donors. They are not the same thing. Large dollar donors are your business folk, wealthy investors, the folks that live in mansions and fly in private jets, right? And these people matter. They matter in politics because they can write big checks, yes, but also because they typically have a lot of skin in the game as to who's going to be that elected official. And so who the big donors go for is kind of a thumb in the wind sort of test for, is this candidate somebody that can interview well and get support? Because if you're in a small group setting with a couple of big donors and they close their checkbook, maybe you don't have as compelling a story as you think you do, okay? But if they open their checkbook, then maybe it's worth pursuing this further. Small dollar donors are very different. And so large dollar donors typically at the beginning of a campaign, small dollar donors towards the end of a campaign. These are people that have $20 to give, $50 to give, maybe $100 to give. These are average Americans, hardworking, the absolute bedrock of our society, and their money matters too. Absolutely it does, but again, we want evangelists. That's, even if you can self-fund, you still want to take small dollar contributions. They are just as important as big dollar contributors, maybe even more so. And a good campaign will have a blend of both large and small dollar donors. A lot of times you'll hear candidates bragging about what percentage of their donations come from, $250 or less donations or whatever. What they're trying to say there is, I have the appeal of the masses, right? Lots of people, everyday Americans favor me, not my opponent, as you can see by this breakdown. It's an interesting way to brag, but it's not everything. The point is, you need to have some blend of both large and small dollar donors. Once you have the money, you need to spend it efficiently. And this is where the Cantor versus Bratt thing gets very interesting. Eric Cantor was convinced he was going to win re-election, didn't have to worry about it, didn't spend a lot of money, and what he spent wasn't very efficient. Dave Bratt spent his money very efficiently, very creatively, and was able to pull off an upset. Efficient spending is as important as how much you raise, even can be more important. Because remember, it's not true that the person with the most money wins. It's also relevant how efficiently you spend that money. Good candidates spend a lot of time raising money, a lot of time. I'm not going to give you a particular percentage. I've heard lots of percentages thrown around. Most of them probably make you vomit. The point is, good candidates spend a lot of time raising money, and for good reason. This is, it's like the peace through strength thing, right? Or gunboat diplomacy. If you raise a boatload of money, you can scare off potential challengers. That makes your job easier as a candidate because you don't have as many people running against you. Good campaigns also spend their money efficiently. I tell people all the time, if you're going to ask somebody for their hard-earned money, you have to promise and show them that you're going to spend their money as efficiently as possible, that their money is not simply being thrown away on frivolous things. When I say frivolous things, there are campaigns out there that hire their cousin or hire their buddy from high school, in some useless role in the campaign, and they give them a bunch of money, and that's, in my opinion, kind of crummy. But it happens. It happens all the time. It happens on both sides of the aisle. You don't want to do that. That is not how you show respect for your donors' dollars. And lastly, believe it or not, I have had occasion where candidates have said to me, gee, I've raised all this money. What am I going to do with it? It's a very uncommon problem. There's no such thing as too much money. First off, you can just save it for the next cycle. You're going to be up for election again sometime. Save it. Secondly, you can use it to help win allied races. So let's say you're running for mayor. Find a couple of people running for city council that are like-minded to you and take some of your overflowing cash and donate it to their campaigns. Now, when they get on city council and you're the mayor, there is some appreciation for each other and a willingness to work together that may not have been as pronounced had that not occurred. So, any such thing as too much money. If you have a lot of money, good for you. Again, use it wisely, use it in a way that will help you in the long run. Again, I am Doug with Tusk Consulting, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, tuskconsulting@gmail.com, and we will see you in the next video. Oh, in case you didn't know, I gave platelets today. That's why these are there. That's why I got my Red Cross shirt on. Go to the Red Cross, donate blood, donate platelets, whatever you can do. They actually do need it.